YouTube, despite having a dominant Western Conference Finals run in the 2024 NBA playoffs, the Minnesota Timberwolves have stumbled out of the gate here in 2025 a little bit. Despite some lofty expectations they had coming into the season, they're currently sitting at 7th in the Western Conference at the time of me recording this with a 14-11 record. In this video, I'm going to attempt to answer the question of what happened to the Minnesota Timberwolves through analysis of team stats, player stats, an offseason trade. We're going to dive into all of that. And then I'm going to answer a much more important question going forward, which is how can they turn their season around in 2025 to hopefully compete for a title once again in this locked and loaded Western Conference. All of that and more in this video. Without further ado, let's get right into the curious case of the Minnesota Timberwolves season and what they can do to fix it. Let's go. So first on the agenda, there's no secret about it. The Wolves have not been the 2024 version of themselves. And obviously the elephant in the room of this video is going to be the Karl-Anthony Towns trade, in which the Wolves would send their second best player, Karl-Anthony Towns, to the New York Knicks, who is, by the way, playing out of his mind in New York. Expect a video on that, folks. For Julius Randle and Donte DiVincenzo. And naturally, this is going to have a massive impact on how they play this season. And I personally thought when the trade happened that this could be a big positive for Minnesota. I actually was one of the people that thought it would be a W trade, but that was assuming that Julius Randle and Donte DiVincenzo would give you what they gave New York, or at least something similar to it in regards to production and overall value. I thought, like a lot of other people, if those two players could give you that, then not only does that make up for Cat's offense walking out the door, but it also gives you much needed depth in the process, which the Wolves needed badly this summer. Unfortunately, it has not been that seamless for Minnesota in regards to Randle and DiVincenzo, but on the bright side, there's still plenty of season left to correct the course with these two players, and I definitely think they can. But for now, in my opinion, the trade has clearly been the biggest catalyst for the Timberwolves' regression in 2025. And let's talk about Randle and DiVincenzo, because they are two of the most important players for this franchise, no doubt about it, and the team needs them night in and night out to produce, particularly on offense. Julius Randle, if you just look at his season as a whole so far, I actually think he's done an okay enough job as far as what you would expect from him going into the year offensively. I mean, he's not going to be making an all-NBA team this year, but it hasn't been a disaster or anything like that. I think it's been, like I said, okay enough. The problem with Randle's season so far for the Wolves is that he's just been a little bit inconsistent from a game-to-game basis, and actually there are numbers to back this up. When Julius Randle shoots the ball well, particularly from three, the Wolves win a heck of a lot of games. But when he shoots poorly, they lose a heck of a lot of games. And if we look at the numbers here, in the Minnesota Timberwolves win so far, Julius Randle is shooting 50% from the field, 39% from three, and 87% from the line. And there is a big time efficiency gap between the losses and the wins, because in the losses, he is shooting 46% from the field, 27% from three on less attempts, and 78% from the line. So basically from those numbers, we can determine that what kind of a night, efficiency-wise Julius Randle is going to have for any particular game could end up determining the outcome of the game in regards to his efficiency. I mean, that is such a big discrepancy between the wins and the losses. He has become the X factor night to night for the Wolves, and clearly in 11 losses, his shooting has been one of the determining factors. So obviously the consistency just has to be a little bit better from the efficiency department for Julius Randle if the Wolves want to be the top 3 seed that they were last year and, survive this Western Conference in the playoffs offensively. As far as Donte DiVincenzo, this is the biggest disappointment, I would say, if you're a Wolves fan. I am not a Minnesota fan personally, but if I were, this would be my biggest disappointment. Donte DiVincenzo is brought into this team in the Randle package to be basically the team's best shooter. You know what I mean? He is a knockdown catch and shoot guy, last season being one of the best shooters in the entire NBA, no question about it, for the Knicks. And if I'm a Minnesota fan right now, I'm asking myself, where is that guy? Because this was a crucial part of the Karl-Anthony Towns trade. You needed a lot more depth in the backcourt, and I personally thought DiVincenzo would be a solution to that problem, adding potent offensive spacing, scoring, and particularly shooting from the catch, on the move, off ball, on ball, doesn't matter. The dude's a sniper, or at least he was, because Donte DiVincenzo, through 25 games, currently averaging 8 points a game on 35% from the field and 32% from three on 6.5 attempts per game. This has been a humongous negative to the Wolves offense, simply because they have to rely on Donte DiVincenzo so much after the Karl-Anthony Towns trade. You are losing so much critical spacing for the offense with Karl-Anthony Towns gone, and you need a dynamic off-ball shooter to fill that role, and DiVincenzo is just not doing it at this point in the season. One of the only true pure floor spacers on this team is just not hitting shots, and in my opinion, that is the biggest reason Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo combined just aren't making up for Cat's offense on certain nights, and it's hindering the Wolves offense as a whole big time in my opinion. And with DiVincenzo not shooting well for the entire season basically, Anthony Edwards has had to carry a ton of the slack as far as shooting the basketball goes, and in Anthony Edwards fashion, he is totally up for the challenge, which is absolutely crazy because if you look at the numbers, Anthony Edwards has transformed seemingly overnight into one of the greatest shooters in the NBA, period. He looks like a different player out there on the perimeter. Anthony Edwards averaging 42.5% from three on 10 attempts per game, folks. That is not who this guy has been throughout his career, but like I said, it's totally Ant to be like, nobody else wants to make a three, I got it. And how incredible has it been? I mean, Ant is absolutely keeping this team afloat. I don't want to say single-handedly because that's a very, simplistic way to look at things, but he is doing everything he possibly can and more on both ends of the floor every single game to keep the Timberwolves competitive. And unfortunately for the Timberwolves, in kind of a weird way, they need every bit of it. And actually they need even more because it's just not been enough. On one hand, it's amazing that he's been able to do all the things he's doing this season and carry the load night to night on both ends like he has been. But on the other hand, I think if you're a Minnesota fan, you don't necessarily want him to have to do that every single minute of every single game he's on the floor for your team to even hang on in a close game. I mean, you just have to get more out of the role players. And as I said, Anthony Edwards is carrying not only his weight, but a lot of other players in my opinion as well, particularly offensively. One of the things that is so, I guess, devastating about Anthony Edwards' immaculate season so far is just that with all that he's doing, it's just not going to be enough in this Western Conference. As we know, it's just not possible in the modern Western Conference to have one player carry you, either all the way to the finals or very close to it. We're seeing right now, especially this year with Denver, we're going through a similar thing with Nickeil Jokic, who is having another MVP caliber season, but it's still not enough for the Nuggets to overcome the West. You just can't do it with one player anymore. And unfortunately for Ant, you just need the role players to be better. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, but it's really a shame that Anthony Edwards is playing like a true NBA superstar and his team is only 14-11. Another factor of the Wolves' regression, in my opinion, has been Mike Conley. And Mike Conley's such a great NBA point guard throughout his career and has been such a difference maker, throughout his time with the Wolves as a lead playmaker and a veteran stabilizer to this offense. In my opinion, this just might have to be his last year as a starting point guard in this league. And it's not his fault. He's doing everything he can and he's 37, but 34% from the field this season is just not cutting it. And I know he's shot better from three, as of late, and he's still a really good playmaker. I mean, super efficient in that category this season. He's averaging 5 assists per game on 1.5 turnovers. That is awesome. So he's been efficient as a playmaker, but once again, this is just not last season's Mike Conley, and I think it's having an effect on this offense. And again, not his fault at all, but I just needed to point that out for the video. I think those are some key topics I wanted to highlight as far as, what has happened with this season and why is it so different from last season, as far as like the big headline kind of things. But there's so much more to this equation that we have to cover in this video before we get into the question of how can they turn this season around. And to do that, I think we need some team stats and player stats to really get the full picture. So if we look at the Minnesota Timberwolves, individual player stats, the vast majority of your offense night to night is coming from Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle. You have some other guys chipping in with, role player type offensive production in their roles like Naz Reid, like Rudy Gobert, and like Jaden McDaniels, Nickeil Alexander-Walker as well, but you're just not getting much anywhere else, which is fine. That's not necessarily a bad thing if it's working correctly. One of the big problems with this team offensively, in my opinion, has been the absence of a true legit lead playmaker. Again, Mike Conley's been efficient and he's always going to give you some good, solid, efficient veteran playmaking. But at the end of the day, this team just divides too much of the playmaking to Anthony Edwards, Mike Conley, and Julius Randle. I think it needs to be a more focused attack as far as, lead ball handling and playmaking duties go within your offense. I mean, all three of those guys are capable playmakers, but again, not necessarily players you want to be leading your offensive attack. I think this team could really benefit from a true star caliber lead playmaker, but that's just my opinion. If we look at the individual players shooting, this is why I wouldn't be too worried if I'm a Wolves fan. You're still surviving in this Western Conference 14-11, and they have been playing better as of late, but it's almost encouraging in a way that a lot of these shooters on this team just players aren't shooting the ball very well and you're still managing to win games. I mean, other than Anthony Edwards and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who were absolutely shooting the cover off of the basketball, you're not getting great efficiency beyond the arc from Jaden McDaniels, from Naz Reid, or from Julius Randle, and those players are going to be taking a lot of threes. You know, Mike Conley is, despite the 35% from the field, is shooting the three ball well this season at 37% on 5 attempts per game. Dante DiVincenzo, again, this is the biggest thing that's going to have to change if this team wants to win seriously in this Western Conference again. He has to shoot around a league average on that volume or the Wolves are in trouble, in my opinion. But, you know, with just a little bit of an uptick in efficiency and consistency from Randle, Naz Reid, and McDaniels would go a long way for this offense, in my opinion, if they could just hit a little bit more consistently on those catch and shoots. You know, much more important that we talk about the team stats, because the player stats are one thing, they can always fluctuate, but the biggest reason last season the Minnesota Timberwolves rose to one of the, you know, up and coming monsters of the Western Conference was because of their smothering league best defense. They were incredible defensively last season all across the board, perimeter, interior. They were a nightmare and that was their identity. So let's take a look at this season, how they compare. You know, while they're not exactly the best defense in the NBA, they have been very successful this season on defense compared to the rest of the league. You know, it's not last season's standards, as I said, but this is a really good defense once again. It's just not great in my opinion. I mean, they're 4th in the NBA in defensive rating, which is awesome, behind OKC, Houston, and Orlando. I mean, they're right there. But, you know, the rest of the stats is kind of where you see a lot of drop off from last season. I mean, last season, Minnesota was 5th in the entire league in defensive rebounding. This season, they're at 16th. That's a big decline. Last year, they were 6th in the NBA in steals and 5th in the league in blocks. This season, they've been 12th in the league in steals and 24th in the league in blocks. Last season, they allowed the 15th least opposing points off of turnovers. This season, they are 20th in that regard in the entire NBA. Last year, they allowed the 4th least second chance points for the opposing teams. So top 5 in the league last season, they are 12th in that regard this season in the entire NBA. In opponents' fast break points, they were 6th in the NBA last season, and this season they are 12th, and they allowed the 2nd least opposing points in the paint per game last season, which is a very crucial stat, one of the biggest and most important defensive stats, and this season they are 17th in the NBA. I mean, these are big time categories here that I'm talking about, and a lot of these aren't even close to last season. This is a very different defense that we're seeing this season compared to last year, and, you know, while it is still a good, solid defense that, in my opinion, has still been above average and has the capabilities to be, you know, well above average on any given night, they are not playing to their strengths, and that is lockdown, total domination defensively. Some of it could have to do with, you know, new personnel. I mean, you bring in Donte DiVincenzo, Julius Randle. Neither of those guys are necessarily, you know, all-world defenders, and they're playing heavy minutes. You know, you lose Kyle Anderson. I mean, there's plenty of things we could talk about in terms of, you know, the defensive personnel from last year to this year, but at the end of the day, you got some of the best perimeter defenders in the league. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, you have Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels. All three of those guys fantastic on ball handlers, and you have the reigning defensive player of the year and one of the greatest anchors in the league in Rudy Gobert. There aren't really many excuses you can make as far as why this team wouldn't be as dominant defensively compared to last season, and that has been another huge reason why they're not, you know, number 2 in the West again. I'm not going to go as far as to say it's been a, you know, defensive disaster or a night and day difference, even though the stats kind of indicate that. I think it's somewhere in the middle. I mean, it's not necessarily you went from the first defense to the 30th defense, but I'd say it's more like you went from the first defense to around the 10th, or, you know, potentially anywhere from 8th to 15th defense. Okay, so that is a big discrepancy, especially when you're not, you know, playing elite basketball offensively night to night as a team, which they are not. But let's get into the part now that we looked at all the data, now that we have all the numbers fresh in our brains. Can this team by the end of the season end up with the number 2 seed? Can this team really become what they were last year, as great as they were, making it all the way to Western Conference Finals? Is that still possible for this 2025 group of Timberwolves that we're seeing? Can they save this thing, right? Disclaimer, you know, we looked at a lot of analytical stuff and numbers throughout the video. You know, moving forward, these will be my takes, and so just my takes, just my opinions. Don't have to agree with them, but I just want to clarify that it is no longer a super, you know, fact-based video. These are opinions. So can they turn it around? My answer is absolutely. This team has the roster, they have the system in place to where by the end of the season, if a lot of things go well for them, which we're going to talk about, about, you could be looking at, just as dangerous as a team last season as they're going to be this season. No question. I mean, they have everything they need to be able to fix this and become legit threats in the West, but there's a lot of things they have to figure out before that happens. We'll talk about those, but I just want to say, Minnesota fans, don't be too down about your team this season so far. It has been a good sample size, but again, there's no reason to think that with the, new chemistry issues they could be having, with big time pieces coming in from last season, there's a lot of stuff you have to figure out within a season, and it's a good thing we have all 82 games for that. Chemistry is a big deal in this league, and so it takes time. Your season is not over, don't panic yet, but I will say, this isn't going to be a cakewalk. This Western Conference is all-time great. Okay, and you're gonna have to fight your way through that, fight your way out of that. The things that need to happen for me, for the Timberwolves to turn this thing around and become what they, at least similar to what they were last season, there's a few, right? For one, I think if you get something similar throughout the season from what you've been getting for Julius Randle, maybe just a little bit more consistently and a little bit more efficiently, I think that's perfectly fine. I don't think you need a ton more from Randle other than just what he's been doing, but, a little bit more consistent and efficient. Dante DiVincenzo, he's gonna be one of the X factors. I mean, he has to play like Donte DiVincenzo in order for this team to succeed at the highest level. He's such a crucial piece for this offense, the way their team is, built and structured. He has to shoot the ball better, and I mean a lot better. I don't mean like, a couple of ticks of a percentage. I mean, he has to be an elite shooter for this team to get to its highest potential. If that doesn't happen and he can't turn his season around, you're going to be in trouble. I mean, you're going to have to find that, scoring somewhere else. You're going to have to find that floor spacing somewhere else. You just don't have those types of players to replace a Donte DiVincenzo on your roster. Another thing I think is going to be super important, this defense has to be better. They have all the pieces for it. This isn't a situation where Cat was a all-world defender. I think he's an underrated defender, and I think it was important for this defense in terms of the size and length and help defense he brought. But at the end of the day, you have all the pieces to the puzzle defensively. They just have to be more cohesive and get truly, get back to the roots of what made it all work last year. I don't have all the answers to that. I'm not Coach Finch. That has to be their identity. For them to be a great team, they have to be one of the best teams in the league defensively. And when I say one of the best, I mean like top 3 or 4. If they're going to be close to where they were last year in this West, they have to dominate every single game defensively. You could, if you're, Coach Finch, maybe try some of the younger guys. I mean, you could give Rob Dillingham a little bit more time, in my opinion. He was a big addition this offseason, and for him to not be playing as much as maybe you'd like to see if you're a Wolves fan, that's got to be something he's considering, because you just need a little bit more offensive pop in this lineup. It can't just be Ant and it can't just be Randle. I know there's other guys chipping in here and there, but listen, those are the two guys at this point. And Naz Reid is a really good and versatile offensive player. Jaden McDaniels is a good and versatile offensive player at times, but you just need more pop. You need more potency when it comes to, this second unit and offensive firepower, particularly from the perimeter. One of the things I found fascinating, researching this video, was that the Wolves are shooting a lot more threes this season than years past, and quite frankly, it's just not working that well, especially when guys like DiVincenzo, Naz Reid aren't shooting up to their standards. Julius Randle is never going to be a sniper from out there efficiency wise. I mean, he's totally capable of taking and making tough shots from the perimeter, but he's just not Karl-Anthony Towns. He's a very different type of player, and so what you're getting from him from 3, I think, is okay right now, but it has to be more consistent. But overall, the key takeaways is just the defense. It's just got to be similar to where you had it last year, and guys like DiVincenzo, they got to step up and they got to start playing their role if the Timberwolves are going to compete for a title. And I'm not trying to blame Donte DiVincenzo. I'm sure he's in the lab shooting. It's just, it happens with shooters, and you just have a down year sometimes and you lose that confidence a little bit, and it's a slump. It's just totally a slump, and it's not his fault, but it also is what it is, and he's got to figure it out. Ant can't do everything offensively. You need a little bit more, again, of a legit number 1 playmaker on this team. I know Conley's good for his role, but that is one of the things I think if you're looking around the deadline, you have a little bit more flexibility if you're the Wolves at this point than you did with the Cat contract. We'll have to see what happens. If there's a lot that could happen this deadline, right? But you could use more playmaking and you could use a little bit more creation from the perimeter. But other than that, I like your chances to turn it around. This will be a playoff team, no question. They're just too good. If I had to predict right now, they'll end up somewhere between 4 and 6. That's me being safe with it because I do believe in them still, but there's just so many really good Western Conference teams this year, and I also expect a kind of a similar thing from Denver. And so I think you're going to make the playoffs, and I think you just have to figure out that defense. But at the end of the day, you have a bright future and you have a bright bright season left ahead of you. Just thank the basketball gods that you're not a Sixers fan. That's what you should be doing, because man, I would love to be a Timberwolves fan right now, folks. And you know, just one more thing before I end it. Listen, you guys are 7th in the West. You know, that's like being 3rd or 4th in the East, right? This is not the end of the world. You're not 8 and 15 or 16 like my team is. You know, you still have plenty of season left to get this thing going, and you have been much better as of late. I mean, you're not necessarily, you know, fighting out of the lottery here, okay? You guys are gonna be just fine. You had a little bit of a rocky start, but you're totally in a position in this West to, you know, take over some good real estate in the standings, right? And so just keep that in the back of your head. You're not in the worst position possible. It's not where you wanted to be at this time, I get it, but it's not the end of the world. You still have plenty of time, plenty of opportunities. Now, that's gonna be pretty much it for the video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and hopefully it could explain some things and give some insight on things you might not have thought about. Thanks for making it all the way to the end. I appreciate you watching. Definitely all of your feedback down in the comments, all of it, positive, negative, whatever you think about this situation, let me know down in the comments. I am very, very curious to hear from Wolves fans. You know, totally would love some feedback from Minnesota fans, or if you're not a Minnesota fan, fine. You know, if you've just been paying attention, or you think something, you know, interesting. You know, I love all the insight you guys give me. You guys teach me so much in the comments all the time, and I can't thank you guys enough for it. So all feedback appreciated. Let me know all your thoughts on this Timberwolves season and discussion down in the comments. I will always, you know, try to reply to every comment I can. If you did enjoy the video, please leave a like. It means a lot to me. It helps the video reach new people, and so they can maybe enjoy the content as well. And so if you did enjoy it, you know, that would mean a lot if you could just leave a like down below. Also, if you're new and you haven't subscribed, what the heck are you doing, man? Nah, I'm kidding, but like, we're on the road to 15K, and so if you could subscribe to not miss more content just like this, if you enjoyed it, you know what I mean? Hit that red sub button down below, and awesome content like this will spawn into your inbox. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any more videos just like this. We have so much fun stuff planned. I can't thank you guys enough for staying patient, staying with me on this channel. The NBA is my passion. I want to do something special in this NBA community as a creator, but I need your guys' help to get there. And so please, you know, like, comment, subscribe. That's the best thing you could do to support. I appreciate all you guys' support. I love you guys so much. Follow my Twitter. Link is down in the description. And this has been what happened to the Minnesota Timberwolves in 2025 for the NBA season. Hopefully you guys have a fantastic rest of your day today, and I will see you in the next one. This is your boy D Haven. As always, peace.